All right, let's see if this works. Okay. Looks like everything's up and running. Right, this thing that I set up earlier. Three if you buy Sky. How's it going? Give me 1 second, guys. I'm just putting a couple of windows next to each other so I can see everything. Hey there, Roheo. How's it going? So one thing that I'm trying to do, and that's part of the reason why it's a little bit confusing for me right now. I mentioned in the Substack chat earlier that um, I'm streaming to multiple platforms at the same time. So we are right now on YouTube, we are on Twitch, we are on Twitter X, and of course we are on Substack. Now, if you are on Substack and you send a message, you will notice that it's not going to pop up in the video. Um, that's because Substack currently does not have any kind of integration with the streaming software. So I'm probably just going to have to read out if you send a message there. Now, if you are able to connect to one of the other three platforms um, and send messages in the chat there, that would make that a whole lot easier because then your message will pop up in the stream right there under my picture. So that's just kind of like the options that we're going to be experimenting with for tonight and see how that goes for everyone. Um, so that's that. Now, um, one thing that I do want to definitely chat about really quick before we start talking about the latest article that I put out about the deep state is to go over a little bit on what's going on with the trade war, just in case you guys are not aware. Um, so I'm just going to go to our Doge tracker right there on the website, and the two biggest things that happened today are um, so yesterday Canada imposed their 25% surcharge on electricity. Trump is right now doubling their um, steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%. So that's going to have a big impact for us here in the United States. Um, because, as you know, a tariff is essentially a tax, despite what Trump might say. So that means that we're going to be paying more here for steel and aluminum coming um, from Canada. So that means prices of cars are going to be going up. Anything that's going to be using steel and aluminum. So, and then of course, the thing that happened also is Canada is planning to start issuing US dollar based bonds. So, what that essentially means is that people will be able to buy bonds from Canada that are backed by the US dollar, which means that um, when the United States issues their own bonds, they might have to have a higher interest rate, meaning that we might see our interest rates go up as a result. If that sounds confusing, let me know. I can definitely explain that a little bit. Um, what is this? Give me 1 second. So there is that's going to be an issue for us here because we're possibly going to be seeing our interest rates going up, and um, that's definitely going to be a problem. Sorry, I was just blocking spammer from the chat. Um, one thing that also happened is that JP Morgan and Chase, they're now saying that we're looking at a 40% chance of going to a recession. That had been a 30% earlier in the month. So now we're looking at a 40% chance of recession. And a couple of places are now reporting that um, the stock market, of course, has been getting destroyed. So if we take a look at the Dow Jones, I know that went down substantially in the last few days. So for the month, we're down something like 7%, which is crazy. I know that the Nasdaq yesterday lost about 4% of its value. So everything right now is looking pretty green as far as the market is concerned. So that's that. Um, Let me take another look here. Um, so, does anyone have any questions about what's going on with the trade war before I move on to talking about the whole deep state article that I sent out yesterday? So I'm just gonna hop onto that. Just take a quick look at the other platforms here, see if everything is still running good. Looking pretty smooth. All right, so I released this article yesterday, and it's definitely a pretty long article, and got a lot of good feedback from everybody so far. So I appreciate those that shot messages about it. Um, the whole idea is that one of the biggest things that they say in the right wing and MAGA and everyone is that there is a deep state. They talk about George Soros. They talk about um, uh, all the globalists controlling the government, unelected officials, and stuff like that. And I think that we have an opportunity to really talk to reach out people on the other side by starting by agreeing with them that there is in fact a deep state. And then of course the idea would be to say, actually, yes, there is a deep state, but that deep state is not George Soros, it's not the globalists, it's not the stuff that you typically see on Fox News and on right-wing propaganda, but instead it's the actual body of people that control that propaganda, along with other institutions and entities as well. So, of course, from the image here, you can see who I'm talking about. Talking about Fox News, talking about the stuff they see on X. But more importantly, we're talking about three big organizations and some smaller ones. We're talking about the Heritage Foundation, ALEC, the Federalist Society, and all these people that are in this picture. Um, I realized after I sent out the article that I didn't really point out who is who, as I'm naming them throughout the article. So if you're not familiar with some of who these people are, I'll give you a really quick um, list of names here. You got Paul Weyrich in the middle, and we're going to be going over these people in a second. You've got Milton Friedman, you got Jerry Falwell, you got Rupert Murdoch, um, you got Leonard Leo up here. You got a couple of the billionaires. You've got Charles Koch, and you've got Harlan Crow here. You may have heard of Harlan Crow because he's given a lot of money to our favorite justice here, Clarence Thomas. um, so these are some of the names that are going to be popping up. So as we see the name, you can kind of like think of the faces, who they are. It's not that important, but sometimes it's easy to remember who's who if you know who the people are. So I'm just going to go moving on through here. Um, One thing that's pretty interesting is it all starts really with the Lewis Powell memo. I don't have him in the picture up top, but he used to be a Supreme Court justice. So it would be this guy here. Uh, so he used to be just a conservative lawyer. Eventually, Nixon appointed him to the Supreme Court. And this is the first guy that we start with here. Now, if you're reading about this, you can click on the link. You can actually read the memo. It's kind of long, so I'm not going to go over that. But the most important thing about the memo is that it sets up a blueprint for what conservatives needed to do in order to take up the basically destroy the New Deal, essentially. Um, so this here is a picture that I decided to put in. It gives you a pretty good idea of how the game gets played. You got a billionaire, you got a Supreme Court justice, you got Leonard Leo, who is the guy that picks up all the judges and all that. Um, yeah, the three if you buy Sky. So if you look at after the Great Depression, you've got the New Deal. That's how they essentially saved the economy in the United States. They created Social Security, they created the safety net, you set up the minimum wage, all the good stuff. They start raising taxes quite a bit on the ultra rich. They by the 1950s, the top marginal tax rate is about 90%. So that means that anything that you would make over about $470,000, you would be paying 90% in taxes. So all of those things combined, high taxes on the rich, Social Security, So everybody pay taxes, but the top marginal tax rate, which is the highest bracket, was very high on the rich. So everybody paid taxes, but the rich paid really high taxes. So everybody, if you made only up to a certain amount, you only paid a certain amount of taxes, but then you had the brackets, right? So a lot of people, let me see if I can find a good explainer thing. How marginal tax rates works. I've seen pretty good images of it. So it is a good example right here, right? So like for example, right now, if you only make um, up to $19,000.50 on that first $19,000, you pay 10%. So the amount of taxes that you would pay is 10% of your total taxes. If you make up to $58,000 on the first 19,000, you still only pay the 10%, but on the amounts between 19,050 and the 58, you would pay 12%. So right, so it's a progressive tax, exactly, right? So we already had that back during the New Deal, but where things were very different was the top marginal tax rate, which right now is only like 37% on anything over a certain amount. Back then, it was 90%. So for every dollar that you made over $470,000, which right now would be about 4 million, you would be paying 90%. So on average, when you average out what the taxes were, if you're really rich, you would be paying about 50% total if you're a pretty rich individual. Now, all of that is gone these days, and that's part of what the whole deep state thing is. They really worked on taking that down quite a bit, um, along with other things. But it always starts again with Mr. Lewis Powell. Again, he was a conservative lawyer. Um, a lot of the big businesses were really concerned with what was going on because the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement and academia and the media, everyone had moved towards a much more progressive idea of how things should be, and they realized that if they were afraid that they were going to completely lose power. So they figured, okay, what we need to do is to come up with ways to turn around the New Deal, essentially, right? So when you look into the Powell memo, this here was basically the blueprint. The idea was we're going to get money into politics. We're going to get conservative judges into the courts. We're going to take control of the media, and we're going to get into academia. And so it all starts there, 1971. And it's pretty interesting because up until that point, like I was saying, everybody was still pretty progressive, but then they realized, okay, we need to change this. Um, so the next person that we have that's a really big player is going to be Paul Weyrich. Now, Paul Weyrich, he is really the grandfather of the right wing takeover. If you're talking about voter suppression, if you're talking about um, getting religious people into politics, this is your guy. He masterminded most of it. Where the Lewis Powell memo was all about corporations, Paul Weyrich was all about uniting the right and turning them into a political power that pretty much would control politics to this day. Um, I think I've got this set up to play. So let me know if the audio goes through or if it doesn't go through. This here is something that he said. No audio? Okay, let me fix that. Let me see why not. And I'll try it again. Um, surprised that it's not coming through. Let me take a look. Interesting. I can see that it shows like it's not coming through, but on my thing here, it looks like it should be coming through. Hmm. So what the audio that's playing is basically this quote here. I don't know why that's not picking up though. Okay, so I'll just skip the audio part right now. That's unfortunate. You guys can probably pull it up on the article later, and I'll have to try to figure out for the next stream why the audio is not picking up. My bad. I will have to troubleshoot that later. But the idea is that Paul Weyrich, throughout the years, he built a lot of the right wing institutions that exist today. Um, so yeah, I see you guys on Substack letting me know that the audio is not working. I really don't know because on all my things here, well, I see one place that shows that the audio is not working, but I honestly don't know why. Let me see if I can try one more thing. I really hope that this can work. Yeah, every place it says that that's set as the microphone. Okay. Try. Let me try one more thing. Oh, I apologize. I will troubleshoot that for the next time. I don't want to have you guys all see troubleshoot. So let me bring back up the Substack video. All right. So so we have Paul Weyrich, and he creates the Heritage Foundation in 1973. He also creates ALEC in 1973. We're going to be talking about them later. He also creates the Moral Majority in 1979 along with Jerry Falwell. This guy is literally everywhere. In the 70s and in the 80s, if there's anything to do with political strategy, he is involved in it somehow. It's quite uh it I can't even pick a word for it because he single-handedly built almost everything that you see today in right-wing politics when it comes to strategy. It's almost one guy. It's just crazy. um so again, one of the biggest things that he did was voter suppression. He set up the religious right. He weaponized Christianity. So we're going to be talking about the abortion issue earlier. He was involved in that. He was involved in literally everything. It's quite something. Um, the next guy that you want to be thinking about is Milton Friedman. He is the if you heard of Reaganomics and trickle down economics, he is the grandfather of that. Um, how do you weaponize Christianity? We're going to be talking about that further down, but the idea was that evangelicals didn't really use to get involved in politics much, and um, Paul Weyrich realized that if the Republican Party was going to have a future, that they needed to get those people involved in politics. And that's exactly what he did. He succeeded in that in a way that nobody thought was going to be possible. So that's going to be the one of the biggest things that he does. Um, so again, yeah, the main idea, the main thing, the main takeaway from Milton Friedman is that he believed in supply side economics, and he used to be a college professor in Chicago. A lot of his ideas impacted even other countries, like in South America. He's the guy that invented the idea of shock doctrine, which is the idea that you can you want to sometimes manufacture a crisis because that gives you the opportunity to change things around, which is something that we're dealing with right now today. One of the things that I have said in the past is that I think that the Trump administration is trying to manufacture an economic crisis. It all goes back to this guy. It goes back to Milton Friedman. Um, so that's the main takeaway for Milton Friedman. Next, you got Jerry Falwell and Ralph Reed. Uh, what was COVID? I don't think that COVID was a manufactured crisis. There is a lot of things that people, um, there's some conspiracies there. I don't think that there is enough facts to point to it having been intentional. I definitely think that there is a possibility that there could have been a lab leak of some kind, but I personally don't ascribe to the idea that um, that COVID was a manufactured crisis. It was very poorly handled, especially here in the United States. A lot of people died that probably should not have died, but I don't think that it was a manufactured crisis. So going back here to Jerry Falwell and Ralph Reed, these are some of your two biggest theocrats of the 70s and the 80s. Um, Jerry Falwell formed the Moral Majority alongside Paul Weyrich, and their whole thing was all about getting evangelicals to become political. And again, they did a phenomenal job of executing that plan. So the main thing you want to think about these guys, they're the people that are bringing in evangelicals who are radicalizing them into being worried about the abortion issue and LGBTQ issues and stuff like that. Just to give you an idea, evangelicals actually supported Roe v. Wade back in 1973 when that decision was made by the Supreme Court. And then today, you fast forward, and they're absolutely against it. So all that whole change happened all because of the Moral Majority, Jerry Falwell, Paul Weyrich. It was a brainwashing operation. Hey, Filtero, yep. Was it poorly handled by Trump to get rid of weak people? I don't know. I think it was just really, he didn't care. He didn't care if people were going to die. He only cared about his government and his popularity. That's why I think that at first he lied to the public, and we know that for sure now. He pretended like COVID was no big deal, even though he knew it was. He claimed that he was going to disappear in April, even though he knew that he wasn't going to disappear in April. I think he just figured that he could contain COVID in the media, even if he couldn't contain it in the real world, and he didn't care if people would end up dying as a result of it. So, again, pretty unfortunate. So going back to here, we've got We've got Jerry Falwell and Ralph Reed. Their whole thing was what I like to call bringing the foot soldiers into the Republican Party, and the foot soldiers were all the evangelicals that they would essentially brainwash into supporting the Republican Party, even if he was going to hurt their own self-interest. Next, we have Leonard Leo, and he's probably the most powerful person in the United States today because he essentially, in a roundabout way, controls the Supreme Court. Right, so he is the guy that picked John Roberts, Samuel Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, and essentially put them in the Supreme Court. No Republican president will appoint somebody to the Supreme Court unless he gives the okay on it. So he is essentially the kingmaker for the Supreme Court, and of course, we're talking about people that get life appointments. So he's the guy that set the people that are in the Supreme Court right now, the people that killed Roe v. Wade, the people that did Citizens United, the Shelby versus Holder case. Everything that happens in the Supreme Court is essentially done by the people that were picked by Leonard Leo. My understanding is that right now he has a multi-billion-dollar fund to help manage the Federalist Society, and it's it's just crazy. If you wanna pick one person today, where Paul Weyrich was the mastermind in the 70s and the 80s, I would say that Leonard Leo today is the most powerful person. So when you hear MAGA and right-wingers talk about George Soros, the real George Soros is today, it would be Leonard Leo, because he has more power than any one person. If you really think about it, he's got even more power than Donald Trump, because he's the person that put the people in the Supreme Court who gave Donald Trump immunity. He is the person that put the people in the Supreme Court who may be the only people that can stop Donald Trump. So that's how powerful this guy is. So then we move from the people that are working on the back end to the people that have been in the media, right? So of course you have to talk about Rupert Murdoch, Roger Ailes, and Rush Limbaugh. Rupert Murdoch is the guy that owns Fox News, along with a lot of other big pieces of the media empire. I don't really know what his deal is, to be honest. I'm not sure that he is even right wing. Phil, any way to police the Supreme Court? The short answer is no. They've been able to decide themselves that nobody's above them in a way. I would say I would like to see an amendment someday that goes into the Constitution that gives specific ethical parameters that they need to follow. But until that gets done, they have a lot of leeway with what they can do, unfortunately. I think one of the biggest problems that we have is that when the Constitution was written, it was assumed that only good people would be appointed to positions of power. But unfortunately, as we see today, that's not always the case. And one of the things that we need to come to accept is that we do not live in the world that the founding fathers thought that we lived in, where again only the good people would rise to power, and if somebody bad were to be appointed or find themselves in a place of power, that the other people there would stop them. I mean, you can just go back to Trump's first and second impeachment and how the Republican Party chose to protect him. And the founding fathers expected that if something like that were to happen, that somebody in the party of the president would still take that person out. But that's not what happened. So I don't know what the solution is, but um, it's gonna have to be a constitutional amendment at some point if we're able to actually save the country from what's going on now. So you know we have to wait and see. So going back here, we have Rupert Murdoch, Roger Ailes, and Rush Limbaugh. Rupert Murdoch is a billionaire that owns a lot of media, um, including Fox News. Roger Ailes used to be a political operative for Nixon and eventually became the president of Fox News under Rupert Murdoch. And Rush Limbaugh, he was a shock jock. He used to be in AM radio. He died not long ago after Trump gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which I think was a disgrace. But he is the guy that created the whole let's demonize Democrats and feminists and liberals and all that, going all the way back to the 80s. He is the one that, when Michelle Obama talks about when they go low, we should go high. He's the person that taught the right how to go low. It all starts with Rush Limbaugh. And where Rupert Murdoch provided the money, Roger Ailes provided the brainwashing when it comes to Fox News. So those are the three main guys that control the media. Now, why are all of these people important, right? People in MAGA, when they do their conspiracy theories, they tend to be somewhat specific, and you're not going to be able to talk to them unless you're talking at least at the same level of specificity. So, they'll talk about George Soros, they'll talk about Hunter Biden. So knowing a little bit about these people gives you the ability to push back, and say, actually, no, here are the real key players that have been controlling the government for the last 50 years. You've got, Lewis Powell with the memo back in the 70s. You've got Paul Weyrich. You've got all these guys. They've built the entire ecosystem of the right that we have today. So now you hear what I have next is the actual institutions. So like I mentioned before, Paul Weyrich created the Heritage Foundation. He created ALEC. The Heritage Foundation, everybody hears about them now because of Project 2025. But the truth is that they've been around since the 70s. They've been around since the 70s, creating all the policies, creating all of the strategy, everything that happens in the Republican Party is essentially built by the Heritage Foundation. And it goes back to Paul Weyrich. They're the ones that set up the budget cuts, the regulation, reducing the taxes for the wealthy, doing all that during the Reagan administration. That was all the Heritage Foundation. It was not Ronald Reagan. He was basically just a tool to do what the Heritage Foundation said that should be done. Starting with the in 1981, after Reagan becomes president, the Heritage Foundation also starts talking about having an organization that would control the naming of the justices. Phil Toro, to what end is it all about money? It's all about money and power, essentially. That's exactly right. So, and it goes again all the way back to the Powell memo. It goes all the way back to essentially destroying the New Deal, because the New Deal put too much power in the hands of the average person, essentially, right? So with the New Deal, you had a lot more unions, you had a lot more progressive taxation. You had they were, with the civil rights movement, they were essentially being able to destroy the segregation, which these guys were all in favor of segregation. Is it like Handmaid's Tale? I don't know that they want to push it all the way towards Handmaid's Tale, but I could see it going that direction. The logical conclusion would probably be that. But one of the things that you're going to see is that with the civil rights movement, they were able to finally beat segregation with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act. And at first, the religious people, they were not a big fan of desegregation, but they realized that they were not going to be able to sell racism to the American people anymore, because even the evangelicals were starting to be against segregation and against racism, even though you had some very powerful religious people like Bob Jones University that still wanted to keep their university segregated, but they were starting to lose their tax exempt status. So, and they couldn't get the political will, they couldn't get the people to be in their favor because the civil rights movement had succeeded. So they needed a different issue to galvanize the evangelicals and get them to be political. And that's where these guys are going to come in, and they're going to weaponize abortion as the thing that brings evangelicals into politics. But just going back here, so we follow the same line of thought. It's the Heritage Foundation is the brains of this entire thing, even including what I just mentioned. Um, and then when you fast forward to today, you've got Project 2025. You know, the whole idea is to essentially destroy the federal government, because that's essentially the last thing that's still standing in the way. They have succeeded in brainwashing enough of their base. They have succeeded in pushing all of their propaganda. The only thing that was still in the way, it's essentially the federal government, your career civil servants who don't want to be politicized. So I think that that's essentially the final part of the plan for the Heritage Foundation is Project 2025. Get rid of anybody in the government who's not willing to go along with their plans, and either leave them out or replace them with people who would uh, do what they want to be done. And again, always keeping up with the idea that really is, if you think about it, that really is the deep state, right? Because none of the people on the Heritage Foundation are really elected officials. Paul Weyrich was never elected to any position. Leonard Leo was never elected to any position. These are all people that have, in one way or another, controlled the United States government all the way back to the 1970s and the 1980s without ever having to be elected. So if if you want to talk about a deep state, that's your deep state right there. Next, you got ALEC. So where the Heritage Foundation, they create the policies. ALEC is the organization that turned those policies into law. It was also founded by Paul Weyrich, and a lot of the bills that you see in Republican states right now, or the bills that you see get pushed into Congress when the Republican Party has a majority, it's all literally written by ALEC. So voter suppression laws that are hitting multiple states today, they're written by ALEC. Anti-union legislation, it's all ALEC. If it's going everywhere, it was probably written by ALEC. And so ALEC and the Heritage Foundation go pretty much together. One of them is, again, the policies and the ideas. ALEC is the actual bills. And then next you have the Federalist Society, which has been controlled by Leonard Leo. Now, one thing I probably have to correct here, if I remember right, it wasn't actually founded in 1982. I probably shouldn't have used the word founded. It already existed, but it was almost recreated in 1982, and now it's fully controlled by Leonard Leo. And these are the guys. They basically handpick judges and justices to the Supreme Court. So if you're an up and coming lawyer and you want to become a judge, and you want to be appointed by a Republican president, you better believe that you need to get in the Federalist Society and get their training and basically get brainwashed by them. Otherwise, they're not going to pick you. So they teach the ideology of the right wing, and then whoever learns it the best, whoever they think will be able to do their bidding, they get picked to be suggested to a Republican president to appoint them to the federal bench or to the Supreme Court. So these are the guys that control essentially the third branch of government, the judiciary, as far as Republicans are concerned. And then, of course, we have to talk about the evangelical church as an institution. You've got, the Southern Baptist Convention. They're extremely powerful. They've been there, again, since the 70s. There have been multiple organizations within the evangelical church. You've got the Moral Majority, which, again, was created by Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell. The Christian Coalition by Ralph Reed, and they're all about essentially weaponizing evangelicals into as a political arm of the Republican Party. So they're the ones that are going to be brainwashing everyone now about abortion and LGBTQ people. And if you really look into it, they don't actually care about any of these things as a matter of Christianity. They just care about it as far as using it as a wedge issue that can get Republicans to vote for essentially the deep state, right? Because the idea is if I can get you to believe that abortion is an abomination that's going to destroy America, or if I can get you to believe that, in the Great Replacement theory, or if I can get you to believe that transgender people and all that they are going to, come and corrupt your kids, then you're going to be too freaked out about that to realize that I'm scamming you and getting you to vote in a way that lets the corporations rip you off. That's right. The idea is it's essentially to divide and conquer, right? If you just like Phil said. So that's really the idea. And they're extremely powerful. It's almost like a cult in a way. And I say that because, again, I don't really think that they care about anything that's really about Christianity. They only care about controlling people by keeping them afraid, keeping them hating other parts of the country, keep them hating half of the country, and then they'll just vote whichever way they say. And a lot of what these organizations will do, like the Moral Majority and the Christian Coalition, is to, all right, Phil, I'll see you later. Thank you for being here. A lot of what they will do is to push people to vote for people in the Republican Party. So there's that. And then, of course, you've got dark money, right? Because this whole thing, it costs a lot of money to run all these organizations. So you've got the Koch brothers. They've put a ton of money into the entire right-wing deep state. They fund the Heritage Foundation. They fund ALEC. They fund Federalist Society. They put a ton of money in. A lot of times they raise funds from corporations, which then get funded in as super PACs. And they're able to fund this entire apparatus that I'm talking about here. So you've got the entire thing. When you put it all together, Heritage Foundation writes all the policies, ALEC converts them into law, the Federalist Society picks the judges that will support these laws, the evangelicals provide the votes, and then you've got the right wing propaganda. They keep everyone in line, and they've got all the dark money going in. Now, um, we really need to talk about just how the propaganda machine works. Um, it all starts with Rush Limbaugh. He really, again, he perfected the idea of brainwashing people into being afraid and hating the other side. So you start with him, and then Fox News takes that over, puts that on TV, takes it to the next level. You've got a 24/7 news channel that essentially does nothing more than um, keep everybody afraid, keep everybody hating the other side, and they've been extremely successful. And as time has gone by, that has now, since then expanded a lot. You now have, and we're going to talk about OANN in a little bit and Newsmax, but the idea is they are even more extreme. You've got Sinclair Broadcasting. They own a ton. They own something like 200 and something local stations. They um, they are like Fox News, but at the local level. And then you've got social media influencers, and you've got something for every flavor these days. And then you've got the people, the microbloggers on X and Threads and whatnot. They 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 spread propaganda in real time, essentially. So with Fox News, they've been around since 1996. Again, it was created by Rupert Murdoch and run by Roger Ailes. Um, they anything that the right wing needs to be propagandized, the Fox News will take care of it. It's whether it's election denialism that led to January 6th, whether it's COVID-19. You've got on Fox News when Tucker Carlson was still there, he was talking about replacement theory right on Fox News, which is borderline, fascism, and they had no problem spreading any of that. Of course, again, you have OANN and Newsmax. When Fox News wasn't radical enough talking about the election being stolen in 2020, OANN and Newsmax saw an opportunity to be even more radical than Fox News. So that's basically when they come up. And the thing that's crazy about it is that because they're even more right wing than Fox News has felt the need to become even more right wing. So over the last few years, you will see Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity being even more unhinged than they used to be, and that's that. So then you have Sinclair Broadcasting. There's no real big names behind Sinclair. They're just a corporate conglomerate that buys local news stations. So if you have a local news station near you, there is a pretty good chance that Sinclair has come around and bought them, and they will spread right wing propaganda very subtly, essentially. Second. Um, so that's what they do. They buy up all of the local news stations, and then they'll push right wing propaganda a little bit more subtly. They don't have anybody like Laura Ingraham. They don't have anybody like Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson, but they do push right wing propaganda at the local level. And then this part here is probably the most important today, because the truth is that social media for the right wing, what they've done essentially is build something that has your flavor of propaganda, no matter who you are. So you've got the well-groomed independent media figures like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, Matt Walsh. You've got these guys. They come across as just the truth tellers. The facts don't care about your feelings. What is this? Somebody's spamming on Twitch. I'll have to get rid of that person later. But so you have those guys. Then you've got your extremist conspiracy theories people. You've got Alex Jones, Nick Fuentes, Steve Bannon. They are super out there. They have no problem talking about all of the conspiracy theories. Let me just see if I can get rid of this spammer. Can I delete their message? Sorry about that. So you've got the Alex Jones, the Nick Fuentes, the Steve Bannons, and all that. They talk about the Great Replacement theory. Nick Fuentes is a straight up neo-Nazi. Steve Bannon will talk about all the COVID conspiracies. So they're just out there. Then you've got your fake centrists like Tim Pool, Jimmy Dore, and Glenn Greenwald. They just pretend to be centrists, but they're not. They're definitely right wingers. You've got the people that are supposed to reach the youth, like Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA and PragerU. You got what I like to call the diversity shields. You got the Candace Owens, the Jesse Lee Petersons. These are going to be African Americans or women, somebody that would represent a minority on the right wing. You know, they get to say that they're not racist or not misogynist by having these token people. And then you've got the I'm just asking questions types of people like Joe Rogan, Russell Brand. They're also just right wingers. And then you've got your microbloggers like Laura Loomer, Keter, Jack Sobiak, Libs of TikTok. They're typically on Twitter and Threads, and they spread right-wing propaganda. But the thing that is very interesting about this entire ecosystem is that it actually it's pretty interconnected too, because what will happen is a lot of times either Laura Loomer, Jack Sobiak, one of these people, they will pick up something on Twitter, just a conspiracy theory, and then they will try to make it bigger. They'll pick it up and they'll try to spread it further, and then if it succeeds, then it moves up to the social media level. You're gonna see people like Tim Pool or Charlie Kirk or Candace Owens. They'll start talking about whatever conspiracy these guys started on the microblogger level, and they'll start spreading it. And then if they succeed, then you start seeing people like the larger ones in the Daily Wire or in Steve Bannon or one of the bigger names. They will spread it out. And again, if that keeps growing, then that gets picked up by Fox News or OANN or Newsmax. And then by that point, it's essentially a fact. Even if it just started as a conspiracy up here, it would just get spread all the way up the chain, all the way into Fox News. And now the base would just treat it as if it was fact. So it's a feedback loop that keeps the propaganda going. Now, one thing that I think it's very important to realize is that the right wing they're not a monolith. I have written another article saying that we shouldn't even call them MAGA because it kind of unifies them. But it's definitely important to realize that there are different people in there because we can use their differences as wedge issues. But insofar as the way they vote, they are almost like a monolith, right? So the idea is we're going to push the propaganda really hard so that we can keep everybody brainwashed and voting for the same thing, even if it's against their own self-interest. So there is the where you have all these different groups. I'm not going to spend too much time in it because I've written another article about it. You can look at that another time. Again, the nuance is beside the point as long as they're voting together. So again, the key is to exploit their differences if we can, but as long as they're voting together, they're one and the same. Now, how do they keep everything together, right? Going back to the propaganda, they will attack the government. They'll say, you know, the government is a problem, and it really is a problem if you're a large corporation or if you're a billionaire trying to hoard all the money you have, because the only way that you can control large corporations and the only way that you can um, have any control over the wealth that's being accumulated by these people is with government. So that's one reason why they're always attacking the government. Um, they're against secularism, so they want a Christian nationalist state. And the reason why they need to attack secularism is precisely because one of the main ways that they've been able to galvanize the party is by exploiting Christianity. So what you do is you say, hey, the left wants to destroy Christianity. So secularism is a problem. Even though when you really look at the Democratic Party, when you look at anyone, they typically are generally fine with any religion as long as you're not actually abusing anybody or doing anything crazy. But they will always sell the enemy as coming after Christianity. Education is a thing that they're attacking always. It's kind of funny because we're in this week, and last week, they were talking about um, coming after the Department of Education. Um, so there's that. They're always attacking education. And one of the things that even the founding fathers said back in the day is that one of the things that you need for your government to work is to have an educated uh, base. So the idea is, you know, keep everyone stupid and it will be very easy to control them. So that's one big reason why they're always attacking education. Even today, when you look in the demographics, the more educated people are, the more likely they are to vote for Democrats and, you know, against Republicans. So it's a very important thing for them to attack education as much as possible, so they can keep people uninformed, so they can control them. And then the next thing that they're always going to be attacking is going to be the safety net, right? Because the safety net is funded by taxing the wealthy, by taxing corporations. So if you don't want, you know, if you're one of them and you don't want that money to go away, you have to attack the safety net. You have to convince people that Social Security is bad, that Medicare is bad, that Medicaid is bad, that food stamps are bad, that all these things are bad, because if you can destroy those things, then there is no need to come after their money. And then, of course, inclusivity is bad. You have to remember, and it might be a topic to talk about another time, that the people who are in the Republican Party today used to be essentially the Confederacy, the people that did not want to get rid of slavery. So there is a built-in racism that has permeated throughout time, going all the way back to the Confederacy and the Civil War. And um, we're definitely going to have to talk about the Southern strategy at some point. But the idea is that there is racism built into the Republican Party today. And it permeates in a lot of different ways, but they can't be outright racist anymore. So that's those are the five main things that they will always be attacking this right-wing deep state. They're always going to attack the government. They're always going to attack secularism. They're always going to attack education. They're always going to attack the safety net, and they're always going to attack inclusivity. So the idea is you use your right-wing media to keep the cultural war going. And if one issue loses steam, you move to the next one, right? So like in the early 2000s, they were fighting same-sex marriage. They wanted to make sure that gay people could not get married. Once they lost that, they moved on to trans people. Again, after 9/11, they were all about Islamic terrorism being a threat to the country. Once that started losing steam, they moved to woke. Um, well, hey there, Dom. Glad to see you join. Um, so they moved from talking about Islam being a threat to the country to wokeism being a threat to the country. Um, Once talking about racial issues lost steam, they start talking about parental rights. They start talking about banning books. So the idea is to always make sure that there is a cultural war issue front and center on Fox News that can keep the rage machine going. So, and it's not that they care about any of these things, because again, the evangelicals used to be fine with abortion back in the day. They were fine with Roe v. Wade, but now they're not. It's all manufactured. It's not that the base cares about the issues because they're brainwashed into thinking that these issues are a threat to their existence. But the people controlling them, they don't care. They couldn't care less one way or the other. So it's something to keep in mind, that the outrage machine, they don't care about any of it. It's all brainwashing and getting people to be um, divided, right? So that's why I say, it's how you keep the libertarians and the theocrats working together. Because libertarians, if you leave them alone, they would be against the Christian nationalists. It's how you get the blue collar people to be aligned with the billionaires, because otherwise the blue collar people would realize that the billionaires are screwing them. It's how you keep the isolationists going along with the warhawks, because otherwise they would not get along. So the idea is to keep them aligned together by attacking the people on the other side. Yeah, Don. So that's one part of it, right? They want to get their people out to vote, but they want to keep our people from going out and voting. So that's where the voter suppression comes in and all that. Now, where the deep state really works is exactly by calling the Democratic Party the deep state, right? Because they actually have all of this infrastructure, all this apparatus, all these different entities working together. But we don't really have that. We don't have something that has existed since the 1980s and the 1970s to control the laws that get passed. If anything, our biggest problem is that we're too divided. We don't have anything that unites the people the way that they're united. But they will call George Soros the deep state, and the globalists the deep state. They can never point to the facts like I have here, because it doesn't really exist. Give me one quick second. All right. Heinz family. I'll have to look into that. I'm not even familiar with that much. Um, but so it's all about calling us the deep state, and anything they do, they'll say that we're doing, right? It's really projection is their biggest weapon. So when I mentioned the other day Vigilante Inc. You can watch it on YouTube for free. It's a really good documentary about voter suppression. So they do the voter suppression, but then they claim that Democrats are stealing the elections. They they're the ones running a shadow government through all these things, but they say that George Soros is the one doing it. they fill the Supreme Court and the federal courts with partisan judges. They say that no, we're the ones doing it. So it's all about creating a false equivalence. It's all about creating confusion in the media and getting people to not be able to really believe anything. Um, so the idea is we claim that there is corruption everywhere because then that allows us to be corrupt, right? It's the whole thing like we essentially had with January 6th. One thing like that I do give them the base is that if I was convinced, if I was watching was Fox News and Newsmax and OANN and Temple and Ben Shapiro and all of these people, it would make sense to do January 6th because they're all telling you that democracy is being, the country is being taken and all this. I can't see how you would get brainwashed into doing January 6th because everything becomes justified when you have that much level of misinformation and division and hatred being spread. So it's what you get when the real deep state does what they do. And then like I said earlier, the two biggest examples of what they've done is the abortion issue and the gun issue, right? So with the abortion issue, again, if you look back, the evangelicals, they were fine with Roe v. Wade. They actually supported it. The Southern Baptist Convention supported Roe v. Wade, which is the biggest evangelical organization in the United States. It used to just be a Catholic issue. But then they realized that that segregation wasn't working anymore to unify the right. So on a dime, they did a 180. Jerry Falwell and Paul Weyrich went to all of the big churches and convinced all of the pastors to start talking about abortion being a terrible thing. And within a couple of years, they succeeded. They brainwashed the base into doing a 180. Talk about propaganda and brainwashing. It was quite incredible what they were able to do. And then the next one is really the biggest fraud, is the gun issue. Unfortunately, the audio is not working for the stream. I'll have to troubleshoot that later, but you guys can pull up the article. And this guy here, his name is Warren Burger. He used to be a Chief Justice, a Republican. And Dawn, birth control too. But like, again, it always starts with abortion, right? That's kind of like all intertwined. But Chief Justice Warren Burger, who was a Republican, even he said back in 91 that the gun issue was one of the biggest scams in the history of the United States. It was all done through propaganda and in politics as well. The NRA, they actually used to be pro what do you call it? All of the laws like red flag laws and stuff like that. They used to be in favor of responsible gun ownership, but they got taken over by people that wanted to turn into a political weapon. And again, they succeeded, right? So, and now since then, they're taught to think that the government's coming to take away their guns, and that the Second Amendment means that everybody should have an unrestricted right to own a weapon. And for most of United States history, that was not a thing. Not until the 1970s and the 1980s, and all via propaganda again. So this is how they do it, right? This is how they control politics. It's by brainwashing people, by using the media to just spread propaganda, and it's 24/7. So one of the biggest problems with the gun issue, where it's different from the abortion issue, is that with the gun issue, not only does it get used to radicalize people and to keep them thinking that they need to vote a certain way because their way of life is constantly under threat, but it also gets people to buy all the guns and to feel like they might need to use them, right? So that is like a double whammy when it comes to the gun issue. So it's a very concerning one for them to have succeeded so much, because now you've got a bunch of people who have been radicalized, who are basically in a cult, who are also armed to the teeth. But again, the whole point is that they were able to do that all with propaganda. Um, and the idea is that they've realized that they essentially don't need democracy anymore, right? Because they can just gerrymander and do voter suppression to control the outcomes of elections. They don't need the facts anymore because they can just use their media apparatus to keep people brainwashed and outraged and feeling like their way of life is constantly under threat. And they don't really need the courts to be fair because they can put political judges in. And they don't really need a grassroots movement because they got so much money that they can basically buy elections, going all the way back to Citizens United. Yes, Don, you're right. So I mean, the Second Amendment wasn't really codified. The one thing that gives me hope is that today the Second Amendment stands on the same kind of shaky grounds that abortion is, right? So if we could get a more non crazy, non right wing Supreme Court, they could actually reverse the Heller decision and make it to where the Second Amendment no longer means that anybody can have a gun. So that's the one good thing. They would have the only way they can really codify it would probably be to pass an amendment to the Second Amendment that makes it mean that everybody has the right to guns. So that's one thing that does give me hope. But then you are right that that Democrats did completely fail to try and codify abortion. Um, I, it still boggles my mind that the Obama administration didn't do that when they had the power to. But it is what it is now. Now, as for the Chevron case, I agree. It's actually interesting. I don't have this in here, but if I remember it right, if my mind if I'm not forgetting it, it was actually um, what's his name? Um, Neil Gorsuch's mom that argued the case that established the Chevron doctrine. Modern Chevron doctrine. Um, let me see. Yeah, so there you go. So that's it's actually interesting. It was his mom that argued the case that created the Chevron doctrine. I don't know if you all knew that. So that's just like a kind of like interesting uh, piece of information there. Um, so let me just go back to here. But it's Chevron is going to be an issue. I think the immunity decision is also a big issue that we need to get a control over, because the one thing, even with all the craziness going on right now, the one thing that has not happened yet is that Trump has not yet tapped into that immunity decision. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but there is no shot that he goes down without doing something that exploits that immunity decision. So we're gonna have to wait and see how that goes. Those are my two biggest concerns. It's probably going to be Chevron and the immunity decision for sure. Although because he's president, the Chevron decision doesn't matter quite as much while he's president, because the judges would already have been going along with whatever he does anyways. But if we ever get Trump out of the White House, then Chevron does become an issue again. Now, for the biggest irony, of course, of the deep state on the right is that they succeeded. They completely succeeded into getting their base to vote for their own oppression, right? So, when even right now, I was just watching the Sam Cedar Jubilee episode, and you've got all these right wingers that are talking about how good it would be to basically destroy Social Security, to destroy Medicaid, and all these things. So to me, that is the peak of what this real deep state has been able to do, to get their base to completely vote against their own self-interest. You look at Republican states; they have the worst levels of the worst education. When you look at all these statistics, they've got the worst education, they've got the worst healthcare, they've got the worst almost everything, but they keep voting for the same people to come back and basically rip them off, right? And they're convinced that they're doing it right. So it's just, it's sad. And I think that's one thing that when it comes to messaging and trying to break through the echo chamber, we need to try and talk to them as far as, hey, you guys are basically being scammed. And this is what these people are doing to you, essentially, right? By the way, I meant to mention this in the stream earlier, but I set up a way that if anybody wants to try and join via voice, they can. So if you're in the chat and you would like to discuss this in the stream itself, so that I'm not the only one talking, let me know, and I can walk you through how to do it. It's super easy. You can do it from your phone, you can do it from your computer, whatever. But so that is the peak, the ultimate irony is that they've been able to fully brainwash their base into voting against their own self-interest. And to me, that's just psychological warfare, and we need to point out to them that that's what's happening. It's kind of funny. A lot of people in MAGA, when they're talking about conspiracy theories, they talk about psyops. This whole thing is the biggest psyop in the history of the United States, and it's going on right now, and it's quite powerful and it's quite effective. And what he has created is what I call a fascist coalition, because ultimately that's what this is. It's all of these different subgroups, they have joined together and they've been sold what essentially amounts to fascism. And we need to be able to talk to them on the other side and say, look, that's where you are. If you really point to everything that they're doing, that's what it is. They just run on fear and scapegoating, and that's what fascism essentially is. I think I have this a little bit out of order looking at this, but I might need to fix it later. But they're constantly telling their base, the government's coming for their guns, the secularism is destroying Christianity, that education is brainwashing their kids, that inclusivity is just reverse racism, and that the immigrants and the minorities, they're roots of all the problems in the country. Now I'm coining this term hyperbole, which is kind of like the opposite of hyperbole, and that's the biggest problem that we have in the non-right-wing media today, which is the fact that if you try to call them fascists, they will say that you're exaggerating. And then, of course, the media is afraid of being partisan, so they back off of calling them fascists, and they back off from calling them for their most extreme ideologies and stuff like that. So that's something that we need to be aware of, and that we need to, I think it's important to point that out explicitly and say, look, these people are actually fascists. And when they try to push back and say that we're exaggerating, you say, no, actually, they are fascists, right? Because when you look at all the elements that make a movement fascist, it's all there. So, Trump demands absolute loyalty. And if you're not loyal to him, he'll destroy your political career. They're always mythologizing the past that doesn't really exist. The whole Make America Great thing is exactly that. It's all about trying to restore some greatness of the country. They're constantly defying constitutional norms. He tried to overthrow an election that was fine. He talked about terminating the Constitution. And Project 2025 is all about destroying the federal government and consolidating power. That's another arm of what it means to be a fascist movement. For those that joined more recently, for some reason, the audio when I played it on my computer is not pushing to the stream, so I'm not going to play the video. But if you go to into the article, you can play this video from ProPublica. It's this guy. If you don't know who he is, that's Russ Vought. He is Russ Vought. He is the architect of Project 2025, and he's currently the OMB director. He's the guy who's basically in charge of the department that essentially runs Doge. And he talks about how the idea was to destroy the federal government with attrition. He wanted to cause trauma on federal employees. So that's, again, another part of being a fascist movement, is to get rid of anybody who's not loyal to you. And they're constantly scapegoat minorities, and they've got their own concentration camp essentially being set up in Guantanamo Bay. They can now imprison, or they can detain anybody who is accused of a crime if they're also suspected of being an undocumented immigrant. And I think that they are going to be able to use that even against people who aren't. Do you have here, Don? To go back to the 1950s, we have to destroy Europe. The 50s would have happened if other countries made factories, in fact. What do you mean by we have to destroy Europe? While you're replying, I'll go to the next point here. And of course, Trump attacks the press as the enemy of the people, which is a hallmark of fascism. So when you add up all of these things together, they're definitely a fascist movement, and we shouldn't get them away with it in the media. You should always push it. So the question is, how do we fight back against this, right? Well, if you try to do this whole presentation to anybody in the right wing, they're not going to believe you. Well, they're going to shut you down long before you can talk about all this. That's why I say the idea is that you don't want to try and do a 10,000 word essay when talking to them. I don't know, Don. I don't know that it's so much that our factories were left standing at the end of the war, because if you really look at it, a lot of what we did was built just before the war, right? So it was all the New Deal. So I think that the factories, they are a side effect of having a very well put together economic organization, and that's essentially what we had in the New Deal. So even though you had the minimum wage, even though you had unions, even though you had more worker rights, all of that, the economy thrived because the middle class was growing, which meant that people had the money to spend, and then that money turned around and fueled the corporations and fueled the factories and all that. Whereas what we have right now, with all the deregulation and the lower taxes and everything, we have a massive part of the population that doesn't actually have that much money to spend and to recirculate back into the economy. So I think that the key is to have a more New Deal like organization of the economy such that we can rebuild the middle class and and strengthen the working class and have more mobility, economic mobility, so that people have the money to spend, and then we'll be able to see the economy get stronger again. But we don't have that, so that's a big problem. And I mean, even when you look at Europe, like Europe, they do have um, a lot of these things, but I think that their biggest problem is that they relied on the United States for so long for a lot of what happens in the economy, and now we're now in a weird situation where Europe is kind of weak compared to us, and we're turning our back on them. So that's a big issue. So I don't know exactly what the solution is as far as Europe is concerned, but they're definitely in a tough position right now because they're having to, especially with Russia being right there next to them attacking Ukraine. I don't know. I don't know what they do in that situation, right? Because I don't think that they have the I don't know that they can mobilize their economy fast enough to make up for the United States not being there. But I'm hoping that they'll be able to do something about that. Um, yeah, I don't know how that plays out, Don, but it's definitely worrisome that they're in that situation, especially when 9/11 happened. That was the only time that Article 5 of NATO was used, and they came to our aid. They came, they did what they could to, even though it was a lie, the war in Iraq and all that. They came and they joined in, and they fought for our side when we needed them. But now we're like turning our backs on them. It's pretty shameful, when if you really think just from that standpoint, it's just really bad. Um, a lot of their people died in Iraq and Afghanistan fighting our war against terrorism that wasn't a threat to them at the time. So um, definitely something to point out to people in MAGA today, but I don't know that they care too much because again, they are so brainwashed. Um, but yeah, so the whole point of the whole reason I wrote this article, the idea is not so that you're going to, every time you see somebody in MAGA, to tell them all these things about these different organizations and these different people, but it's to just hit them hard to say, hey, you know what, I agree with you guys. Yeah, there is a deep state, but the deep state is the people controlling you. The deep state is not the people controlling us. And then they're going to give you some kind of pushback, and that's when you bring up any of the stuff that's in this article. um, because with everything that's in here, it's all stuff that they can go look it up, and they will find that everything that's in here is true. um, and my hope is that that's one way that we can break through the echo chamber and start peeling off people from MAGA. Now, the one thing that's very important is, and we talked about this a little bit on Friday, we don't want to attack the base directly. You want to attack the cult. You want to attack the cult leaders. You want to talk their deep state, essentially, right? And say, look, is this really what you want for yourself? Um, so like, this is why I have this here. Instead of arguing with them against the idea that there is a deep state, just agree with them. Yeah, there is a deep state, because then you're starting from a point of agreement. But then you turn on and say, the deep state, it's the Heritage Foundation, it's the Federalist Society, and all these billionaire elites that have been running the Republican Party. and you can tell them to go to look it up. You can bring up what's in here, um, and it's there really is a deep state. They're the ones that are stacking the courts. They're the ones that are doing voter suppression. They're the ones that control the media, right? A lot of times they talk about all mainstream media. The biggest mainstream media apparatus that exists called Fox News. They've been bigger than any channel for decades now. They've been bigger than MSNBC. They've been bigger than CNN. They've been bigger than any of them. And now when you add in OANN and you add in Newsmax, that's mainstream media. It's exactly the media they listen to. Who, Joe Rogan. Midas Touch has now overtaken Joe Rogan, but for years, Joe Rogan was the biggest podcast on the independent media space. The Daily Wire, they're massive. All of these organizations, all the right wing media, they're the mainstream media. They're the ones brainwashing people, right? And if you point out, for example, the abortion issue, they don't they didn't even used to care about abortion. They only care about it because it's a tool for brainwashing them, and it worked. You can just look back and point out to them, tell them to go look up again. The evangelicals, they were in favor of Roe v. Wade when it happened, and then on a dime they became against it. That is the deep state operating. You can tell them, look at ALEC. You look at all the laws that get passed on this on Republican states. They're all written by ALEC. It's not the Republican legislatures that are writing these bills. It's the unelected people that work for ALEC that are writing these bills. So I think that there is a pretty good a vector to reach out to them there. And then that's how you start the conversation. And the next thing you want to move to is to say, look, the deep state there, it's not the liberal elites, it's the billionaire Republicans that are taking away your health care, right? Who is it that's talking right now about destroying Medicaid, cutting Medicaid by $880 billion? It's not the Democrats, it's the Republicans that are trying to take that away from you. Who's talking about massing of Social Security? It's the Republican Party. If you look at Mike Lee, he got caught a couple of years ago saying that he wanted to pull Social Security by the roots and throw it away. They're the ones trying to rip you off, but they tell you to be worried about the drag queens and the transgender people and the gay people and the welfare queens. It's all just nonsense. So, they don't want freedom. They just want to control you. They don't care about the flag or anything that it represents. They just use the flag to play on your patriotism. Are you going to let them? That's the way to, I think, to reach out to them, to show, hey, look, these guys don't care about any of this. Like even right now, I think turning our backs on NATO, that's not patriotic, right? I mean, we're breaking our word on a treaty that we have. That doesn't make us look good. That doesn't make us be respected. This whole trade war with Canada, that Trump himself negotiated the current deal that we have with them, but now we're turning back on that deal. That doesn't make us be respected around the world. So they don't care about patriotism. They just use it as a weapon. And then even Project 2025, during the election, they were saying, oh, Trump doesn't know anything about Project 2025, but now it's obviously here. And, these billionaires are getting rich, and the people are just getting screwed. And it's not just Democrats that are getting screwed, it's Republicans even more so than Democrats. So the idea is you want to make them show them that they're literally being just used and discarded. They're good when it's time to vote, but at the end of the day, they're deep state, they're billionaires, and their institutions, they don't care about them. They'll just throw them under the bus. And then the final step is to force them, do they want to be a pawn of this fascist movement? Like they're just making you, they're just scapegoating minorities. They're just creating hatred and division. uh do you want to just be a pawn, right? If you realize that there is this deep state and they're just there for the corporations and for authoritarian power, do you want to keep serving it? Or do you actually want to stand up for American values? The thing that made America powerful, that made us a superpower, it was protecting the middle class. It was the safety net. It was desegregation. But these people just want to bring, take us back to before that. They want to give all the power to the corporation and take it away from the middle class. They want segregation. They want a division. They want hatred. Do you want to be a part of that? They don't care about America. They just care about power. Do you want to? Are you cool with just being a tool, or do you want to break yourself free? You don't have to be. You don't have to march under that banner. You can just walk away. You can just think for yourself. You don't need to listen to Fox News. You don't need to get brainwashed every day. So the idea is that we don't want to call them fascists. You want to ask them, do you want to be a part of the fascist machine? And get them to reject it. So that's my idea of like really breaking through, and you have, again, all of the things here. If they want to argue about the deep state and bring up George Soros and all that, you can just ask them, okay, so what did George Soros do? Compare George Soros. Sure, he's a donor, whatever. Compare what him giving some money to all the things that this deep state has done for the last 50 years. So that's the main thing. And then a couple of other things that we definitely don't want to do is, I know a lot of people have left Twitter, a lot of people have left Facebook. I think it's important to not abandon those platforms because of the thing that I said earlier, which is a lot of the propaganda spreads and starts in those platforms. And when we just abandon those platforms, then it's like you're just giving them the ability to control the conversation. I know a lot of people have left those platforms. I'm on Blue Sky, always telling people not to abandon those platforms, and that's the reason why. And this is just a fight for reality itself. It's a lot of brainwashing going on the other side, and the only way that we win it is by breaking through that brainwashing. And it's going to take all of us doing it. Unfortunately, the Democratic Party is, I don't know what the deal is with them. Some people say that some of them are bought and paid for by the corporations. I think that's probably partially true. When Al Green stood up and did his protest during Trump's address to Congress, 10 Democrats voted to censure him. And then the people that stood with him, apparently there was a meeting with Democratic leadership. They kind of got scolded. I don't know. There is definitely, I don't know if they're just spineless. I don't know if they're paid for, but it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, the Democratic leadership right now is just not there to fight the way that this needs to be fought. So I think it's going to take we, the people, to push this kind of messaging that I'm talking about and get that to grow until until Democratic leadership feel like they have no choice but to take up this messaging. So I don't know how we do that unless we're the ones doing it. So my hope is that we can all be part of this messaging. Whatever platform you're in, you're going to try and push it. One thing that I was going to say is if you have other left-leaning, even if they're centrist, creators that you follow, people like Brian Tyler Cohen, Midas Touch, Glenn Kushner, there's a lot of good people out there. try to get them to reach out and collaborate with the American Manifesto, well, with me essentially, and with our community, so that we can start getting our messaging out there. One thing that I noticed, I'm not gonna say that I can take credit for it. I probably was one of the first people on here on Substack and on Blue Sky that was pushing, calling them fascists and being more aggressive. I'm starting to see that a little bit more from some bigger names. I know that Tim Walz was calling Trump a fascist not long ago. I know that Kyle Kalinske, he's pretty good. He's got no problem calling them fascists. Jesse Dollamore on YouTube, he's also pretty good. But it's definitely growing. And that's good, but it needs to grow faster. So it'd be cool to get some people collaborating and growing that message faster. The one thing that I don't see is that there is not really a comprehensive strategy. Even with the ones that are calling them fascists, they're not very. That's it. They'll call them fascist, and then they will narrate all the bad things that are being done. They don't seem to have a cohesive, comprehensive messaging strategy like I have here. So it would be nice to be able to collaborate and spread the strategy. Let me read a couple of the messages here. Oh, okay. Cliff Cash is pretty good. I almost got to meet him back in January. He went down for the 14th Amendment protest that they had. I went there the different day that he was there. So I almost got to meet him back in January in DC. So this is cool if they're going to be doing this. Maybe I'll go down and see if I can meet him this time. He's also very funny. If anybody has not watched Cliff Cash, he's a comedian and he is an anti-Trumper. He's hilarious. Definitely check him out. So I definitely want to see. I didn't know that he was going down to the sea. I might try to go down again now. Oh yeah, his special on YouTube is absolutely hilarious. Some of the best comedy I've seen in a long time. And Ghost, if you like Cliff Cash, check out Steve Hofstadter. Let me see if I'll pull up the thing here for him. Hofstadter. This guy is absolutely hilarious. Definitely check him out. He also does a lot of anti-Trump stuff. He's not doing activism like Cliff Cash, but his comedy is hilarious. Definitely check him out. But anyway, we definitely gotta try. Here, let me bring him back up again. Steve Hofstadter. Let me pull up his YouTube channel. It's this guy. If you want to pull him up, he's hilarious. Definitely check him out. Especially also if you like watching a comedian that completely destroys hecklers, especially MAGA hecklers. This guy, you're gonna have a blast. He's really good. Yeah, you're welcome. Let's go back here, but I don't know. I don't know if we have a way of reaching out to. I'm going to start trying to reach out to some of the other creators out there, see if I can start doing some collaboration. I'm already doing a little bit of collaboration with some smaller creators here on Substack, which is pretty cool. So we're already going to start growing in that sense. So my goal is to also help grow other creators that, I'm not that big at this point, but there are some smaller ones that are pretty good too. I'm starting a collaboration with Lady Liberty from the American Pamphleteer. We already recommend each other on here on Substack, but we're going to be doing some other stuff together as well. So I'd say definitely check them out. There you go. They have a pretty cool Substack. Definitely go check them out if you all have a chance. If you're not already subscribed to her Substack. I don't want to spoil and say what it is that we're going to be doing, but we definitely got something going on that's probably going to be starting next week. So I definitely want to do some collaboration, especially on Substack. If there are any Substacks that that you guys have a good connection with with a creator, tell them to reach out to me. Let's see, but we watch you and all of us are required to do the hard work. Uh, what do you mean? Because my idea is um, we all have to kind of like oh yeah, for sure, we all have to and not just march and not just call your senators and your representatives. uh you want to um try and use sort of like these messaging strategies um in your own life too, right? So if you have MAGA people in your life, if you interact with MAGA people online, you want to try and get through to them, um, because otherwise, right, they're just going to continue being brainwashed. We need to find a way to break through their echo chamber and get through to those people, because again, not all of them are psychos. A lot of them are essentially victims of brainwashing, essentially. And it's pretty hard because they think that we're victims of brainwashing. So it's going to be whoever can really show to the other side that they are the ones being brainwashed. And the fact of the matter is that um, they are. And it's something that's been built for decades now. Um, so it's crazy. It's difficult, but you know, the battle for America. You know, if the Civil War was fought with muskets, the the current information war is gonna be. We're all part of it, right? We're all a soldier on the current information war, and whoever wins that war is basically gonna take America at the end of it. I don't know how long it's going to go. I don't know if it's going to be a year. I don't know if it's going to be 4 years during the Trump presidency. But that's where we are now. Just we all have to think of ourselves as soldiers in an information war, essentially. So, and I'm just trying to do my best to come up with the strategies that we can get to the people on the other side and show them that they're just being used and discarded. So I think that that's the way to go. Um, now, I am trying to come up with ideas to make these live streams more sort of like more entertaining. I'm sure that for a lot of people this is really dry. Me just going through a long article or even through the news. So if you guys have any ideas to make this both informative and more entertaining so that we can pull more people in, I'm all ears. I did mean to be able to play some videos and stuff, so I'll definitely have some homework from my side to do some troubleshooting to see why the audio wasn't going through. So I'll definitely work on that and trying to figure out what's going on with that. But um, yeah, my goal is that by the end of the month, I am hoping to be hosting this almost like every day, some kind of live stream. And again, most of them are probably not going to be this dry and this lecture like kind of thing, but I do want to have something going on that's more interactive. um, I definitely want to try and get some people that can join on the voice chat so that I'm not the only one talking. I think that that will also make it more interesting. Now, for that, I know that there are some people that do the Twitter Spaces, so I'm trying to meet some people that might be interested in joining the live stream with voice, so that it's a more interesting conversation. Um, let me see something. Um, oh, that's pretty cool, Ghost. Yeah. So even now, technically, I mean, I'm probably going to be disconnecting a little bit, but if you want to try, uh, if you go to look, I'll just drop it in the chat. Watch it. I'll just show you. So if you go to my main site, um, by the way, this is a way that you can also watch the stream if you go to lookim.com. But if you hit join stream up top on the top right corner, you can actually join the stream and with voice and everything as a guest. So just for the future. And maybe another time, I'll just DM you if you don't mind, and I can kind of like walk you through how to use it if you want to, and we can do a test and everything. But I think that will be a lot more interesting to have more than just me talking. But yeah, that's some of the things that I'm planning to do. Um, and I think that'll be something interesting. That my goal again, I don't know what time of the day. Like I want to get to a point where I have a live stream scheduled every day at the same time. I know that I did this one in the evening. The last one was in the evening as well. Um, I don't know how that works for everyone. Uh, I'm thinking something like early afternoon could potentially be better, but I don't know yet. I might give it a try, just see how it goes. Something like maybe like around 1 Eastern time until 3 o'clock is one time that I'm thinking about doing. Uh, but it's just definitely something that I can play around, try and error, see what works best for people. But that's the idea, and we can also do news coverage and stuff like that. But that's the idea for now. Um, okay, yeah, I'll definitely reach out, Ghost. Um, but the goal is to also start uh, growing a presence on YouTube and Twitch, because I know that the discoverability on those is a bit better too. So we can once we start getting more people on those platforms, I think it will help a lot as well, because then the message would just spread faster, right? And again, if it's an information war, that's how you win it, is by getting reach as much as possible. So that's the goal. Um, Now, with that said, my voice, I feel like it's starting to go out a little bit, so I am going to head out. And thank you all for joining. And I might do another live stream either tomorrow or Thursday. I don't know yet. but I'm working on another article too. So I will see you guys next time. Until then, have a good one, and I'll see you then.